All right, everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Plan the Parade podcast. And there's only two of us today. Austin is apparently he didn't want to get up. He didn't want to stay up late because he had to get up early. Although Mr. Middleton, it is 11:47, and you have a flight at what time tomorrow morning?
6,
6, which means you got to be at the airport by what, like 3?
5. No, like 5. Or like 5, 4:30. There's gonna be nobody there.
And especially in New York, you got it. Are you going out of? Where are you going out of?
Newark.
It's not so bad.
No.
Regardless, you did at least spend left me time so we can talk about the great things going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yep, I guess you could say that.
Oh, I mean, okay. So last episode, we thought we were dealing with the meltdown. We thought we were dealing with the peak of when everything was going basically to crap. I think that's fair to say. Like, they lost 2 straight games where they lost 5-2 and they looked absolutely terrible in both games. So what do they do to follow it up? They win 4-0. Probably their best game of the season. Like I can't think of any other way to describe it as their best game of the season. So what did they do as a follow-up? Before we talk about everything that happened in that second period, the Leafs went up 1-0, but were outshot to hell. It was like 16 shots they allowed in the first period. But they're up 1-0. Second period, they can get their shit together, get their act together, and second period will be fine. Then you have, because Peter Mrazek comes in, Reimer gets injured. Then you have Kyle Clifford skating down for a puck, and at this point in the game, the Leafs were down 4-1. Like, they were playing like dog shit. Kyle Clifford absolutely runs over Mrazek. Like,
he got pummeled.
So I've heard some people say that Clifford saw him coming and
no way. He maybe at the last second, but what are you doing? That was the dumbest decision I've ever seen. I never get why goalies do that. Like, no. What is Kyle Clifford gonna do? Even if he reaches it, it's basically at the boards. He has to somehow magically cut in. Like, I don't know. I never look at those decisions and being like, yeah, that was a good decision. The goalie either gets cracked, or he allows an awful goal.
So this reminds me of two things. One, yeah, you're right. I don't know if Mrazek's trying to catch him off guard and hopes Clifford gets out of the way or something like that. Like, I don't understand that, but it reminds me of that situation between Milan Lucic and Ryan Miller. I don't know if you remember. This was years ago when Miller was still with the Sabres. He went to go play the puck.
Lucic crushed him.
Destroys him. Like, knocks his helmet off. It's pretty much similar play. I think Miller also got a concussion on the play. And at that point, I'm like, I don't know why goalies think that that's the smart thing to do. Not only are you heavy and you're not going to be able to move out of the way if a player's coming at you. You can't even do that when you're in your own crease. But to do it when the other guy is skating full speed ahead after the puck. So you thought, okay, at that point, you're like, okay, well, what is Carolina going to do? Is James Reimer going to come back in net? Because apparently he tried, but the doctors were like, no, you're hurt. And pretty badly, too, because he's out long term. So we're hearing about this backup goalie, the emergency goalie. And I know that the Leafs usually have, like, our university league, they have, like, one of those guys. And a guy that's probably played in the OHL before. So someone who's played not professional hockey, but is capable of stepping in. No. The Hurricanes are getting a 42-year-old who is a Zamboni driver for the Marlies, and takes shots from the Leafs and Marlies at practice. And then That first goal goes in, and you're just like, yeah, the Hurricanes are in trouble. Second one goes in. You can't even really cheer for it because it's just like you somewhat feel sorry for the guy because of the situation he's put in, and like the Leafs are in a situation where they have to score. Like they got to figure out a way to win the game. They can't go easy on this guy. And then from there, so they score. It's 4-3. From that moment that David Ayres gets put in the net, the Leafs get 10 shots on goal. What in the hell happened?
I mean, I actually thought towards the end there they had some chances. I think it was near the end where Kapanen had a really close pass to Engvall, and Engvall just didn't get a proper stick on it. But um, they just got outworked every single second that third period. Like it was to the point where they couldn't do anything. I mean, Carolina was literally playing like it was Game 7 of the Cup final, and they were protecting a 1-goal lead. I mean, good on them. I wish the Leafs could do something even remotely close to that. But, yeah, that was just effort-wise. It was the best effort you'll see versus one of the worst efforts you'll see. I don't know how you didn't just step in to the once you got into the zone, I don't know why you wouldn't shoot it. Like I personally would look at it like, yeah, this is an opportunity that will almost never happen again, where you're going to get an opportunity to score a lot. Like I don't care that he was a guy that takes shots. Not during an NHL game. You should have been able to score at least 1 or 2 goals in that third period. And I mean, some of the goals they allowed in that period were awful. Just horrific efforts too.
Yeah. So this is the thing, and you're right. Like Carolina, give them credit. I think what the problem here is the headline is the Leafs lose to the Zamboni driver. Well,
Which
not.
is very pathetic. But they also lost to like a team that played him perfect.
Oh, they were aggressive. They outshot the Leafs to hell, like 50-20. Like outshot them 50-24-25. Like
Yeah, I don't really care for shots on goal. Carolina always seems to do that. I don't really take their shots on goal. I don't really take it for real because I feel like they just throw shit at the net. There's no way they have 50 legitimate shots. I
yeah,
just don't believe it because they
like
always seem to have like 65 shots, yet they never score.
did Freddie actually have to make a lot of saves, like hard saves? Like the goals they scored they weren't easy goals to stop. Like the defense just left them out to dry. Again, it feels like I'm a broken record. The defense left them out to dry. And so, okay, probably the most humiliating loss you can ever have. One of. I mean, people are saying worse than the Game 7s. I mean, the thing about the Game 7s is the Leafs had the lead, or they were in control for parts of those games, and they let it slip away. It's a little different than, you're down, and then the guy goes in, and the other team is basically just like, we got to protect this like Fort Knox. But still humiliating. Like there's no way around it. You can't try to find a silver lining of that game. There are none. What it annoys me here is you hear Mitch after the game. He says my effort was dog shit, using his word. We were talking about what's wrong with this team, what's going on, why can't they find their consistency? When the guy you are paying $10.894 million, sorry, 89 or 8, sorry, 10.893, forgets the Doug Gilmore number, and he says his effort was dog shit and admits it, and it's not the first time he's admitted it, something is wrong. So is it him trying to make excuses and trying to take away some of the heat by admitting he's not playing well? What is he doing by saying that?
I don't know. I took great offense to that one too. I mean, I've heard people talking about it. You just can't say that. I mean, you can say like stuff like we didn't play well or we didn't deserve to win. I just hate how many times they've said, either we quit or, we didn't work hard enough. And it's just like, maybe you should.
There's an easy solution to that. Work
Just
harder.
do it. I don't know why. I mean, it's annoying because, this is probably, the top four. There's very few teams that can ever compete with them skill-wise. Maybe Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh's four best players would be up there. Maybe like Colorado, but I mean, they are in the top five of teams for talent. And I mean, it just, they don't help themselves at all.
Oh.
Like we as fans, especially, I mean, you acknowledge that. We look at the players offensively, they should scare the living daylights out of every single team. But I don't understand how they can't dominate like fucking Eric Holla, Lucas Wallmark,
Warren Fogle.
yeah, like what the fuck is that? Warren Fogle. Who the fuck is that? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a great game though. He had like a hat trick, didn't he?
I don't know if he had a hat trick, but Jake, they were without Dougie Hamilton.
Yep.
Brett Pesci
Pesci
in the second period.
Yeah.
Down two top defensemen. And you had 10 shots on goal on an emergency goalie. Guess what? The Winnipeg Jets had more shots on goal on Scott Foster, who, in my opinion, looked like a better goalie than David Ayres. I mean, good on this emergency goalie because he's getting the fame he deserves. He's doing the media tours. He's going to be in Carolina Tuesday night to do the siren thing. Good for him because he deserves it. But this should not be a story right now. Like, this should not have happened to the Leafs. But it seems to always happen. Which brings me to my next point. So, the trade deadline comes in. Guys, the trade deadline happened. And for some reason, people are unhappy that the Leafs did nothing. What is Kyle Dubas going to do at the trade deadline? Did you want him to do anything, Jake?
I mean, obviously, I just never expected it. Like, he's never been a guy that does deadline deal business, and it's not a bad strategy. I mean, probably one of the few things that Brian Burke said correctly was that mistakes are made on trade deadline day and July 1st. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, some of the deals made like almost no sense. Like, and it's not like they were going to go out and spend assets because they're not giving up, Robertson. They're not giving up Sandine. They're not giving up a future first. They're not doing that. I mean, especially not for what they perceive is, a pretty flawed team at this point. I mean, they've kind of shot all their bullets. They've acquired a lot of good players, and it just didn't make sense. It wasn't really a buyer's market anyway. I mean, the fact that J.G. Pageau, who's had 20 goals one time in his life, got a 1, 2, and a 3, should just tell you everything that else happened. I mean, outside of that, was there any other big name that was even traded or semi-big?
We thought Kreider was done, but apparently that deal came about really.
Yeah. I always felt he wanted to stay in New York. A pretty good deal he got too, 6 by 6.5. I think it's pretty fair value. I would have paid him up to 7. I think he's like a perfect fit for a bunch of different teams, but I mean, the Rangers did, great bit of business there, and
I think
the only big name. There wasn't any big names.
But that contract also shows you what value New York probably placed on him in the trade market.
Oh, if Pageau got a 1, 2, and a 3, you're talking a 1, a top prospect, and probably a 2. And I'm not talking like a team's top 5 prospect. I'm thinking like top 1, 2, or 3 prospect.
Like I'm trying to think. Like, okay, the Anthony CU1 made sense for Edmonton because he can play with McDavid. I'm trying. There were so many deals and so many that didn't make sense. Like Tampa pays a first round pick for Barkley Goodrow.
I mean, the whole thing they were saying was because he's cheap, but I mean, even that didn't make sense to me.
So you're paying
I
first
mean,
round pick to
what?
get talent.
I, I mean, I saw people bring up stuff about, the lack of value in first round picks. I mean, Tampa Bay couldn't find someone of equal value to bring up from their minor league team. Like, what? Bro, am I missing something? He has 8 goals. I don't know. He could be the best penalty killer to ever play, but Jesus, 8 goals and gets a first round pick. I didn't really get that much sense of that. I mean, if that's the going right, the Leafs should have given up like Kenny Agostino or something, or someone in the Marlies for a second or something. I'm not sure.
So the big one that everyone knows with the Leafs was Tyson Berry. I think Bob McKenzie said early in the trade deadline show that if the Leafs were even thinking about moving him, it would be a first and a prospect. I think considering what teams were paying for guys, that seemed like a reasonable or semi-reasonable ask. The problem is, which teams would have wanted him? I thought maybe Vegas. There was a lot of Vegas chatter. I thought maybe Vancouver. But Vancouver already spent the first on JT Miller, which proved to be a
A
decent.
great deal. Decent. He's got like 70 points.
Yeah, he's been really good. They spent all that, a second in their top prospect, one of their top prospects for Toffoli. So it's like, are the Canucks going to do another one like that?
Yeah, I kind of that was probably the only team that really made sense. I mean, people were talking about, Troy Stetcher as the guy that would have come the other way. I don't really watch Troy Stetcher. What I saw was that they thought his arbitration number would be so high that it wouldn't really be worthwhile for them. That's what I thought I saw.
Another
But I mean,
situation, but maybe
yeah.
a better defenseman.
I mean, another thing I saw this online where someone wanted them to trade him for futures and then turn around and trade him for a top 4D. And I've just asked, like, has there been one top 4D that's moved in the last 2 years outside of what? I guess Dougie Hamilton, was that 2 years ago?
Well, Kevin Shattenkirk would have probably been one when St. Louis moved him to Washington. But you're right. Like, there hasn't been a top center. There hasn't been a top defenseman.
Because you don't find them. There's no or elite number one goalies.
Sellers aren't getting rid of them. What seller?
No.
Because if you have a top defenseman, you're not a seller.
No,
You're
well,
not.
you're also building around them. Even
Yeah.
guys like Ottawa, like they're not trading Shabbat. Like, why would they? You build around those types of pieces. I mean, even Detroit, like we didn't really know the guy they took last year, Mo Sider. They're not trading guys like that. The only way you get those guys, we were talking about this last year or last podcast. You can only get them high in the draft.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can get them is draft them. That number one setters, the only way you get them is draft them high.
And when you think about, like, some people are saying, oh, why didn't they go after Sammy Vatanen? Well, first off, Sammy Vatanen's hurt, so
He's also not good.
He's also like he's not top four anymore. He was top four in Anaheim when Anaheim, was a good defensive team.
Maybe in like 2016 he was top
Yeah.
four. He's also really small. He's like 5'10".
Yeah, so I honestly don't know what Kyle Dubas could have done, because he said we're only doing it to move the needle, and we heard about Matt Dumba. It looked like the Wild had no desire, considering they were somehow trying to move Zach Parise to the
I
Islanders.
mean, the scuttlebutt on that was that they wanted Nylander for him, and like that doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
He does. I'm also not really entirely sold on Matt Dumba because I've heard from Wild fans alike they don't think he's like this elite player. I mean, whatever, we can bring this up later on when talking about guys I would conceivably give up for defensemen. Like there is one guy on this team you are not trading. It's Matthews.
Yeah.
You are never going to find ever. 6'4" centerman who can score 60 goals. There's one in the league. One.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up a point that I listened to on Overdrive, but it was minus O-Dog and Noodles. I think it was Bruce Arthur and Dave Feshuk with Brian Hayes. They were talking about Matthews, and they said until Matthews is scoring, he's going to score 50 goals. But the Leafs believe that this guy can be a Selke-worthy player.
I don't
So
know why. I mean, he's great with his stick and he's great at takeaways, but I don't know. I feel like that's just such a different mindset, especially for a player with his scoring acumen. I mean, it works for Kopitar and Taves and Bergeron.
but they can't score
I,
like Matthews.
no, I mean, I wouldn't even want them to do that. Like,
No.
I'd rather him play with a vet who's defensively responsible, is a good leader. I think that's all he needs, pretty much, for me. When I look at him, I just feel like it's accountability and getting consistent effort 82 times a year, or heck, even 70 times a year.
I remember that game against the Rangers where that was Michael Hutchinson's last game with the Leafs.
Yeah, I was at that game.
Late in that game, we saw Austin Matthews get pushed by I don't know who it was. And what does he do? He throws the guy down.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not asking him to go around and be Eric Lindros crushing people, but I mean, he has to be able to stand up for himself and also use his body to his advantage. I think offensively he does that, but I mean, I don't really see people always talk about him being pushed around. I don't think that. I just think I wish he played with more of an edge like he did in the playoffs last year. Like against Boston, he played pissed off and he was dominant in some games where he basically won them games.
Yeah. And
And
so
that's we have these expectations because we see what he can do. I mean, some of the numbers are stupid. He's got what, like 30 goals at home or something like that?
yeah,
Like,
he's lighting it up at home.
yeah. Like you're talking like Wayne Gretzky. Like those are the names that are being talked about with his goal scoring numbers this year at home. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that's where, he's top overall pick. He's probably one of the talent wise, when he's on his game, one of the five most dominant players in the league. I mean, that's where you're paying him this money to be that. And I don't know, for me, just from what I've seen is I don't think you can have a line with him and Marner. I mean, I would switch it back. I mean, we've kind of seen he's going to score goals with whoever he's playing with. I think it's really affected Tavares' offense. And I mean, you just got to somehow find a way to get him going. I mean, for a guy like Matthews, I would like to see like another souped up Zach Hyman. And for me, I've always said it, the perfect guy is Chris Kreider. He is basically the same size. He's humongous,
He's
and
in
he
too.
yeah, and can score goals, but he obviously just got signed. So for me, I think that's what I would try to find in the off season. I like William Nylander a lot. I would like to see Hyman back on that second line and find another person that can play with Nylander and Matthews on that left side, because I think you can find them.
Yeah, I think putting Marner like Tavares. The thing about Tavares is when he isn't scoring, he's still you can see that there's an effort from him. He's not just coasting. He's willing to do other things. I think Marner should be reunited with him. I think for Mitch's sake, because I think when he plays with Tavares, there's a different standard that he plays with. I
Yeah,
don't know. I think Tavares brings the best out of Marner because I think when Marner is
I
on the
think
ice,
they bring the best out of each other.
I think what happens is when Marner is with Matthews, he has this mindset of thinking my job is to feed this guy the puck, and that's it. I think that's the mindset, and it was the mindset because it was working for the longest time because Matthews was scoring. But I think for Mitch's sake, he needs to get with Tavares because I think Tavares, as you said, they both bring the best out of each other. And whether or not it's Hyman on that left side, I think Hyman would work better to be with Matthews just because that especially against top. I think in a road matchup, you can do this home and away. Like, and they've done it so many times where I think it wouldn't matter how you set it up, but have Hyman with Matthews on the road, and then at home, you change the matchup. I think that would work.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for sure. I don't really know what you would do, but I would definitely go back with those lines because I think you have to create two lines that are dominant. And I just feel like the chemistry between those two is so much better. And I mean, I don't know. I've always advocated for it's great to have guys that can pass, but they need more guys that can shoot with Matthews because it would take pressure off of him. Because I mean, we've seen it right now on the lines on the power play. Nobody is taking Marner's shot seriously, as they shouldn't. I mean, he's just not a guy that can shoot and score goals. Um, and that's just been evident from in this streak. He's been atrocious, I think, the past 4 games or whatever. But I mean, I don't know. Hopefully, I mean, I'm more hopeful than with the last coach. I think they will for sure make some changes, and I don't know if they can somehow find a way to beat Tampa Bay. I actually think it's a pretty good time for them to play this team because it's kind of a put up or shut up moment. I don't know. I always feel like when they're always going to be counted out, they always find a way to pull you back in. So we'll see, I guess, with tomorrow. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what they do for sure.
So this brings me to my next point because you just said this team, when you want to give up, they bring you back in. Kind of reminds me of The Godfather. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me right back in.
Yeah.
Leafs fans, this is where my rant comes in. Because I've been hearing it. I mean, for the people that say, fire Dubas, blah, 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 you know what? I think there's a lot of impatience that is unfair to Dubas because he's only been here a year and a half on the job. Year and a half. And we're calling for this guy to get fired. The part that kills me are the people who say, I am done with this team. If I hear anybody tell me they are done with this team, because I hear it in the comments, people keep messaging me online, oh, what's going on with the Leafs? How can you still watch them? I watch this team. It's my choice. I don't tell people to watch the Leafs. Don't tell me to watch don't tell me whether I should watch the Leafs or not. Not freedom of choice. Simple as that. But for the people who say they are done with the team, please just be done. Just don't even say I'm done with the team, and then 2 days later I see you on Twitter talking about the Leafs, or I see you in comment section talking about the Leafs, or you message me talking about the Leafs. If you are done with this team, just be done. Because I'm going to read you something that somebody messaged me, and this is actually a positive thing, or positive from my point of view. So I'm going to have this tweet playing. I'm going to have this tweet up on the screen here. For those of you who listen to the podcast, I'm going to read it for you. Anybody who wants to fire him, Kyle Dubas, can take a bow because their toxic, quote-unquote, support is the Leafs' biggest problem and has been since Harold Ballard died. I consider myself as big as a Leaf fan as an Argos fan. This is an Argos fan account sending this to me. But I would never in a million years reach out to Leafs fans on social media. So I'm going to bring out the important part. Their toxic support. We talked about this not too long ago, about how this is the biggest problem with this fan base. They say they're Leafs fans, but you see the comments right now? This is not a fan base. This is a group of people lashing out and giving out these feelings that they have because apparently it's their right as fans to complain. You know what? Complain when the team plays bad. I don't care. But do not say that you're going to not watch this team, you're done with this team, and then you continue to comment, or you comment on somebody else who's a fan. You know what? They're a fan because they have a passion for the game. And you know what? They'll support the team whether they're playing good or bad. That is the role of the fan. Your role is not to say, you know what? I don't like the Leafs the way they play because that's not the way I think they should play. I'm sorry, they do not care what you think about how you want them to play. They're not paying you millions of dollars to make those decisions. You're paying them to watch games. You're paying for the jerseys and merchandise. That's your contribution. Your contribution is not to say how you think this team should be playing. That's more so for the experts who know a little bit more. And you know what? I wouldn't even, when I say certain things, half the time I'm wrong because I'm not an expert. But I do have opinions because of what I see and what I read and how I listen to how Kyle Dubas talks today, when he says, I can't just make a magical trade to fix everything. And that's the perfect thing to say. You can't just go ahead and make a bunch of moves that's going to ruin everything that he's worked through from to create the last few years. So my message to Leafs fans, if you are truly done with this team, now if you're doing it in a joking way, that's different. But I know there's people who are dead serious. If you are done with this team, just be done because you know what? I don't think you can handle this in your life. I just think it's not your mental capacity just can't handle it. And this is coming from someone who's watched this team since you're like late 90s. And I've been through the ups and downs. And you know what? This is nothing compared to what we've experienced the last few years. Nothing. So stop.
I mean, it's better than just being completely disinterested like they have been in, some years. I mean, it's it's basically this is the only time I'll compare it to the Raptors. The only time. I think this is the only time it actually works is that, the Raptors, oh my God, they won a lot of games. They were in the playoffs every year. They've been in it for what? Is this the 7th or 8th year? They've been in it, maybe eighth year. Maybe eighth year. They've been in the playoffs 8 straight years. I don't care. They clinched this year. They're in. So 8 straight years. They had some years where, oh my God, they were winning games in the playoffs. They would go into series, and you're like, they are fucked. The whole year would go by. I remember they had just won 59 games. You'd be like, oh my God, this entire season is meaningless. We're just waiting for the playoffs. And then when you get there, you know what's going to happen. You just know that the inevitability was going to reach and they were going to get their asses kicked by LeBron James and the Cavs every year, because that's what happened every year. And they didn't even look competitive. They were worse than this. I mean, they had stars who just straight up did not perform. I mean, sometimes it was based on effort, sometimes it was just they were not good enough. They looked like a G League team whenever they played against LeBron. And I mean, there has been some annoying parts of the Leafs, but there at no point have I ever just looked at a season that they've had and said, "Oh, there is no chance that they can win this year." Because the NHL, people always say like, "There's no way this team is going to win a cup." I mean, St. Louis won last year with a goalie that was in the ECHL 6 months earlier. Like, anything is possible. If you get goaltending and you get some, just some guys that are playing above their head, I mean, it's possible. But, I mean, there's no point am I looking at a series saying they got no chance. I mean, that's the great part about the league. That's the bad part about the league. I do think there's a lot they need to change, whether it be, internally in the way that they play and also on the roster. But, I mean, people need to relax. There are way worse situations than the Leafs have. They just happen to be the most popular team in the league, so people talk about them the most. But I mean, if this is your breaking point, a team that's in the playoffs just because they've, played horrifically, then, I mean, you should have quit a long, long time ago. You should have quit after Game 7 when they blew a 4-1 lead. You should have fucking quit after that. That was probably the closest I was. But, I mean, you're never... it's basically like the mafia. You can't quit. There's no way out. The only way out is when you go on the ground.
Jake, I'm gonna ask you because when it comes to Raptors stuff, I remember this game because I think I was working at that time. The Raptors. Okay, here we go. Couple things here about the Raptors. One, you talked about the whole LeBron James thing. That final series that got Dwayne Casey fired. That team looked like they gave up. They looked shell-shocked.
They were just scared. That's the difference. That's the difference between the Leafs and those Raptors teams was I never looked at the Leafs and say, "Wow, they are fucking terrified of this team." The Raptors, they were scared. You could tell from game 1. I remember in that series before they didn't blow it up, but essentially they did. They did an entire cultural reset, changed everything, traded their best player. They did everything. Game 1, they choked it. They were up 14 in the fourth quarter, and they could not make a shot. I mean, I remember at the end of the game, there was 10 seconds left, and JV missed fucking 6 layups. And once that happened, you were just like, there is zero chance they are winning this game. And once they lose this game, they are going to get swept again. And it happened.
So you might have recalled, I mean, we know the LeBron dominating over the Raptors. It was also the regular season too. There was a game in Toronto where the Raptors beat the Cavaliers, and the reaction was like the Raptors had won the NBA title.
Yeah, there was a lot of, man. The thing was, I remember vividly that I think it was the first it was the first series against the Cavs in the conference finals where they were fucking destroyed the first 2 games. Then they came back into Toronto. I still have no idea how those teams won 2 games against. That was the Cavs team that beat the Warriors, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure it was.
I still have no clue how they won 2 games off that Cavs team.
It was but LeBron was commenting on the crowd.
Yeah, that was just so, it's fuck off.
That was in 2016.
Yeah, it was in 2016 when they beat the Warriors. Yeah, I remember that. And if you want to go back and hindsight's 2020 with the Raptors, and who knows? I mean, maybe the thing that I get is, they make these comparables to Masai Ujiri acting like Lou Lamoriello isn't or Lou Lamoriello, or hell, every other, hockey guy that has, been entrenched in a role that he does or does not deserve, more than likely doesn't deserve, for 20 plus years. They're not making those deals. There's no way. Now, I'm not saying that, Kyle Dubas is trading a superstar or their best player to acquire another superstar, but he also hasn't been shy to, make courageous decisions that ultimately have a lot of praise and a lot of negativity, like signing John Tavares. I remember the day he was signed. People are like, it's overkill. They shouldn't have done it. I mean, they didn't need it. And there's also been people who, will go back and say it's something they should have done. Say it again?
There was a friggin' celebration. People were rushing to Real Sports to get jerseys done because not only did it signal a star player wanting to come home and play in Toronto, but also just the Leafs deciding, you know what? We're not taking this slow. We see an opportunity to add a player, we're going to add that player.
And as they should have. I mean, people always talk about a trickle-down effect with that, and, the cap and stuff like that. I don't know if that would have happened. We'll never know. Mm-hmm. But you have, nobody is real. realistically, every single team that was there would have signed him. Boston would have done it. Tampa Bay would have done it. San Jose would have done it. Every single team, all 31 other teams would have done it. So I mean, if they realistically looked themselves in the mirror and said, "No, we don't want this guy for free," they're lying to themselves. I mean, he's also put himself out there by trading a fan favorite Nazem Kadri in a deal I've said that they had to do. I mean, you could not bring him back. I loved him. He was one of my favorite players. He was a guy that brought it every day. His, leadership was apparent. He was a great regular season guy, but you just could not trust him. He was a ticking time bomb, and you just couldn't do it. I mean, I wish they had a player like him. I would love it.
He would be Don Matthews left wing, as you were mentioning.
Or would be a perfect third line center. I hated the fact that they had to give him up, but I looked at it in hindsight and I said, they have to. After he fucked us twice in a row in back-to-back playoffs, there was no way he could come back. And I mean, I still stand with that. I mean, I couldn't see any other way he could have come back, but I mean, they got to find a way to replace him. And I think that that will be something that they will try and do in the offseason. I don't think people always, come back with these lazy arguments that, Dubas doesn't want to add guys that are tough or anything like that. Like, I agree that to a point that is important on rosters, but it can't be where you completely change your philosophy because something hasn't worked. And it's not like they've been in series where they've gotten completely outclassed. They've lost in pretty much 3 very close series that could have gone either way.
Game 6, Game 7, Game 7.
And they easily could have won all 3 of those series had they pretty much just gotten better goaltending and better coaching decisions. I mean, I'm not here for giving excuses. I think you have to have a balance between, all skill and other things. But, I mean, at no point have I looked at it and said, wow, he has done such an awful job that he needs to be fired. I think about that of a lot of GMs. I don't look at his, decision making and said he is doing such a terrible job that anybody would be doing better. I have not said that yet.
I keep hearing the Lou Lamoriello would have done better. First and foremost, Lou Lamoriello was here for 2 playoff runs. I'm pretty sure he was here for Washington. I'm pretty sure he was here for the first Game 7. I think Dubas took over just after that. That first series against Washington, what did he do to make the team better? I'm looking. You look. He gave Nikita Zaitsev that deal. He signed Patrick Marleau to that deal. Other than that, he didn't address the needs that the team had. He did not. So don't tell me that Lou Lamoriello would have done something. Look at, what the Islanders are playing a New Jersey Devil style of game. And guess what? They're not getting anywhere with that. I don't see them getting that.
Exactly. I mean, all these teams that people love for, work ethic and stuff like that. Like, I agree, it is a big component.
Yes.
If you have players that are willing to sacrifice and do anything it takes to win, it helps. But if you don't have talent, you're not winning. You're never, ever winning. I remember for years, they've gone back to win. You need a number 1 D, a number 1 center, and a goalie. Every single champion has had one. Heck, even the Blues had one.
Yep.
I would consider O'Reilly, Pietrangelo, and Bennington. I mean, it's probably one of the weaker ones in respect to Stanley Cup champions compared to some of the ones like, Datsuk and Lidstrom and, Chris Osgood and some of the players that they've had. But, I mean, still, you have to have that. I don't look at teams like the Islanders or Carolina who are, kind of doing this based on system and effort and coaching and stuff like that. Like, look what happened with Carolina last year. They, huffed and puffed. They somehow managed to win a series against the Caps, which I never thought they should have won, but they managed to. Then they played the Islanders, a team very similar to them. They somehow managed to sweep them. And then they went to Boston and they got smoked. They
Yep.
couldn't score goals. Like they probably took 100 shots, probably 50 of them on dump-ins because that's just what they love to do. I'm by the way, I am convinced that they do that purely just for their overlying numbers because it makes no sense how they have 50 shots and I look at them like they got 50 shots when. But I mean, like I said, like if you don't have talent, you're not going to win. That's why I actually have appreciated some of the deals that Carolina's made. I mean, they've gotten upgrades, but still, they're
Up.
just yeah. I wouldn't say it's a big upgrade, but they've kind of started to. I think they've cornered the market on like really good players.
Yeah.
They got what? Maybe one elite guy. Would you even call Aho elite? I'd say he's like a fringe all-star player.
He's
I
an
think
all-star, but he's not like a top 10 player in the league.
no, I think the only guy that's even close to that is the winger, the one that hurt Barry, the big guy, the Russian.
Svechnikov.
Yeah, Svechnikov. He's the only one I think has the potential to do that, but I don't know. I think the only way that team wins is if they get guys like Aho and Svechnikov and Dougie Hamilton to carry them because they don't have a number one goalie. So there you go.
They're boned. They're going with Anton Forsberg and another guy I can't even pronounce.
Nedeljkovic or something.
Yeah, something like that. Like they're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean they've always been in trouble. Their goaltending has sucked for years.
Yeah.
Like I can't like probably the Cam Ward when he wasn't garbage.
Since Cam Ward brought them to the conference finals against Boston again, that one time, and that
was like 12 years ago. And then Cam Ward kind of was trash for a solid 5 years until they finally let him go.
And then they had Scott Darling. That didn't work out.
They've been a revolving door at goaltender.
Yeah. So I mean I think I don't see them going far because of the goaltending. So
for me it's the same with like teams like Colorado, Dallas. Like I just don't see it.
So I'm going to bring up just to end this Raptors debate. Paul Hendrick, my favorite person on Twitter.
Met him. Love, great guy.
He calls out people for their crap online too because they all reply to him, Henny, blah blah blah. This team's garbage, blah blah blah, and then he gives them a really good jab. But this is his reply to Michael Grange's column about why Kyle Lowry would be a type of guy the Leafs would love to have. He's just like this. Let's not forget that the Raptors and Kyle have endured growing pains as well. The 2017 postseason.
Pains. Oh my God, man. There were times where I didn't even want him on the floor.
Yeah, he was almost traded out of Toronto. Let's not forget, people.
Yeah, in like 2015 to the Knicks. And then James Dolan, the idiot he is, was tired of getting fleeced. So he said no. I mean, yeah, they're not even remotely close.
So I'm not even. There's more to this. The 2017 postseason, when going out to Cleveland in 4 games, produced much soul searching. This core group of the Leafs have been together for less than 4 seasons. Yeah, like the first season that they were all together, it wasn't really their team. It was you still had the Tyler Bozak, James Van Reeves, like those guys were given the lead. And then when those guys left, that's when it became those like the Marner, Nylander, Matthews. So let's say 3 seasons where they have been the guys. Guys, the Raptors won 1 championship in their 25 years. And people are saying the Leafs don't deserve to play at Scotiabank Arena because they lost to a guy who's a Zamboni driver. The Raptors, now it is Kobe Bryant, and he's an amazing player, scored 81 points on them. 81. Jake, you probably know this team's history more than I do. I'm pretty sure they used to play at Skydome.
I mean, it's not even an argument. I mean,
Should not.
They're owned by Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which has basically made their bones off the Leafs.
Yeah.
Imagine how garbage they would be if they weren't bought by them. Just based off
And,
the
and
investment that they've put in, they've done a fantastic job. I think they actually have done a better job than they have with the Leafs, which is ironic.
that,
Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment has probably done a better job with TFC and the Leafs, considering the financing, the backing they've given them to, for TFC to get the best players. They always have the best players. They always have the superstars, the MVPs, the teams that can win them the biggest trophies. Then you go to the Raptors. They got guys that are willing to. They rebuilt the practice arena. They did a complete rebrand. They paid to put Drake in charge of merchandise and everything. Now they're top 10 team. They're a top 10 team in the league in terms of branding, in terms of merchandising, in terms of popularity, in terms of success. I mean, it's all because of, the money that was put into them. And I
it's
mean,
like sure that's the big one too. And he's not.
yeah, no,
I
he's not.
he,
I will say one thing. He's not going to be cheap when his deal's up at the end of next year either. I
some are saying
mean,
20 million a season for this guy.
how much?
20 million. Some are saying.
That
What
seems
teams want.
that seems ridiculous.
Which teams are
Like
yeah.
the
And
highest in NBA history was what's his name? Phil Jackson with the Knicks, and he was at 15.
so my question here is, and you're right, like MLSC, Tim Lightwicki, who was the guy in charge that brought Masai here, and then he's the one that brought Brendan Shannon here because he knew that it comes from the top all the way down, because that's been the Leafs' biggest problem since 1967. Management at the top, their decisions have trickled down to having teams that did not have the talent to compete with the other teams in the NHL. You look at the Leafs, you look at the Raptors, you look at those teams. They did not have the management to get them all top. Even TFC. What did Tim Lightwicki help TFC get their first title? Tim Lightwicki got Masai Ujiri, who got the Raptors their first title. Lightwicki, unfortunately, with the Leafs, he got Brendan Shannon, but it doesn't lead to instant success because Brendan Shannon came in and he's just like, we got to do what other teams like Tampa Bay, Washington, Pittsburgh did. Scorch it, build it back up. And that takes time. Sidney Crosby was drafted in 2004? Didn't win his
2006.
2006 was his
2005. 2005.
Yeah, 2006 was his first season. He didn't win until 2009? Was his first cup?
Yeah, first final was 08.
08, 07 or 08. It was in that time. It took
No,
him.
08. They were garbage in 06 and 07.
Yeah. Alex Ovechkin won the cup 2 years ago, and he was drafted and he made his debut at the same time as
04,
Crosby.
yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other examples here. Chicago, they weren't good when Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane were drafted.
I mean, the biggest one is like Steve Yzerman. I mean, he won when he was 31 or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
it took him no salary cap either.
This is the biggest thing I have the issue with the comparisons that people make is that it's completely different league, completely different salary structure for it. You can go into luxury tax, bird rights, everything, where you can make or retain your own players if you pay a certain amount of money. The value that superstars have, individual superstars, and that's it. I mean,
superstar movement around the league.
It's also like if you don't have stars,
you're not winning.
No, like you can be the hardest working team. Like the Raptors are probably the hardest working team, them and maybe a team like the Nuggets or something like that. But the Raptors have two All-Stars, probably 3 or 4 other guys that should be getting paid, 15, 20 million. They probably have 10 deep of really good players. I mean, but they also have stars. and they got guys that have, competed at the highest level. They've won. And I mean, that's the difference. I mean, when you have exceptional talent like they do, and you combine it with exceptional coaching and a culture that everybody buys into and everybody plays with an effort, you're gonna go places. And that's pretty much what the Leafs are looking at. I think they have the right coach. I've been a fan of them. I think they have the players. Obviously they can change certain things, but they have to get the buy-in. And
And
that's the thing that for me, they have to buy in and say, listen, it's great that, I can score 65 goals, but sometimes we have to change our play style when we're up 4-1 and we're not playing to score to make it 8-1. And, that's the thing for me that I've always thought about. The only thing I wish they would do is change their style based on the moment in the game. And that's
and
what they haven't done for what, like maybe two or 3 years?
yeah, look at that ODOG grant the
Yeah.
other day.
He
You
said almost the same thing.
you are paid. He literally was saying you are paid to win the game. That's why you're paid, Matthews, 11.634. Tavares, that's why you're paid 11. Mitch, that's why you're paid 10.893. Willie, that's why you're paid 6.9. You're paid because you contribute to a winning team. Not that you do something and that makes you a good player. No, you're a good player that makes the team a good team that can win. And I think Dubas was talking about the defense. He says it's not just the blue line; it's the whole team has to buy in. Like we've talked about how much we hate Cody Ceci all the time. You know what? He makes a mistake, but he's got to have someone to back him up. And if he makes a mistake,
I mean, that's pretty much like everything in all
yeah.
sports. Like if you have someone that has your back, it's not going to look as bad on you. But I don't know. For me, it just comes down to pretty much if they can buy in, and like I said last week. I mean, the biggest thing for me is I think Morgan Riley is seriously, seriously missed. I think they're missing that big voice on the ice because everybody loves John Tavares, but that's just not him. He's not a guy that's gonna, fire everybody up and, you know, talk the talk and do all that. He's more of a leader by his actions.
Not
And
Matthews,
the Leafs don't have that. Right now they have one guy that's been willing to do that, and it's Jake Muzzin.
and who just got signed, and people were like, "Oh, he's going to be deteriorating." It's like, no, this is a guy they need to keep around because you need veterans. This is actually the biggest problem. The team doesn't have enough of that veteran.
Yeah, they don't have guys that are willing to hold themselves accountable and others too.
Yeah,
I mean, I,
Engvall.
I I thought I thought we were gonna get Muzzin around 5 million, but I always say if it's within half a million of what you expect it to be, is you can't complain.
Yeah, 5.625. Yeah, came for 600,000. Actually, I don't even think you can get a player for 600,000 anymore. The league
No,
mint went up, so it doesn't even matter.
no.
Guess what? That extra 600,000, you find someone else that you can take the money off of. So I do think, like, look, that game against Pittsburgh, the one at home, shows you that this team can do it. They just need to realize it's got to come all the time, or sorry, not all the time, because you can't expect
It's
that.
been 50, 60 games a year.
Jake, you are going to see this team twice this week.
Yes, I am.
May God have mercy on your soul. I
They
think,
are they are 2-1 with me in the crowd, so hopefully if we can get that winning percentage, that would be good. If they could get 3 points out of these two games, massively, the biggest one is getting 2 points against Florida,
yeah,
then I think they'll be in good shape. But if they can get 3 points, maybe four, that would be amazing. But
both Florida
as long as they get the 2 points out of Florida, I mean, I'd be satisfied with that.
both of those teams have also coming off some tough losses. Like Florida's lost a couple of games in a row on the California trip. Tampa got their butts
I
whooped.
mean, so did Boston. That just goes to prove that literally no team. There's
They
no
lost 9-3.
way. Yeah, they lost 9-3 to Vancouver, who I'm a big fan of. I love watching them play.
Yeah.
But that just goes to prove that there's no super teams. You can't do that. People always talk about like the perfect team. there's no team I'd ever, put like a large sum of money on to win it all. It's all just like the playoffs are so fluky. I mean, you look at, splits on, how teams win and stuff like that. Like St. Louis won like 10 road games. That's so unsustainable. I
Yeah.
mean, it's all a fluke. Like as soon as the most important part is getting there, and then I think once they get there, it's like the Leafs last year. They kind of snoozed their way to the playoffs, and then when they made the playoffs, they really sort of changed the way they played. And if they had managed to play better in some of their home games and got some saves, they probably should have won that series. But
Won that game in that series in 6.
at this point, you just have to worry about getting in. I mean, people are overreacting, acting like this team is, look at
Bottom five in the
Look at San Jose. They're fifth pick right now. They don't even own it.
Exactly. Like the Leafs have done that before, where they thought they were good, gave up the assets, and then Boston has our second overall pick. There's a
And
difference.
the 10th, the year after that.
Yeah, there is a difference between this team and those crappy teams that, guess what? Brian Burke, who feeds into some of this Kyle Dubas. I mean, he's also been a big supporter of Kyle Dubas too. So I think people need to realize that this team needs. I mean, they've always needed kicks in the butt. They just need to say, all right, we got to just buy in, guys, as a group and just put in the work. And I guarantee they can do a lot better than they are doing right now. That's all I'm going to say about that. Jake, you have a flight to get ready for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go to bed because it is early in the morning. This is going to come out later Tuesday. Want to thank you guys for listening. If you listen to this whole thing, I really, really do appreciate it. Hopefully, we get Austin back next time, and Chris, we'll see. Because Chris has to tell us about his adventures at front court at the Raptors game, courtside tickets.
Yeah.
We'll want to hear that story, and we also want to see how the Raptors. I wanted to talk Raptors today, but I think it's better to talk about them after they play the Bucks. I think that game will be a must watch, and I know Jake's going to be at the game, so he's probably going to be asking us for updates on that, which we'll get to him.
All right. Perfect.
All right, Jake, we'll catch you next time. Everyone,
Yep.
follow Jake on Twitter, Jake Middleton 12. You can follow me, D_Morassutti. I'll have our Twitter handles in the description, and where you can find this podcast anywhere where you get your podcast. We're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, anywhere you can get your podcast. We are there. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube videos, and we'll have more of them coming out next week.